All right. So my name is Erin Salvaggio, and I'm the program officer in the Health Equity and Strategy Office at the CDC Foundation. I am one of the stretch partners along with ASTO and MPHI, and we have some of our other colleagues on the line, and so I'm going to ask for them to also introduce themselves. Is Carrie on the line if she can get us started with intros?
Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Morgan, and I'm working on this project from the Michigan Public Health Institute side of things. So welcome. Thanks for coming to listen today.
And then Aika?
Thanks, Erin. Aika Luke, working on this stretch effort and initiative from ASTO. So happy to be here and welcome everyone.
Thank you very much. And we have some of our other colleagues on the line, but for the sake of time, we'll save the rest of the intros for the chat. And so we'd ask that everyone on the chat can put their name, their title, and their state so we can get familiar with who's on the call with us today. All right, so for today's agenda, we're gonna go through a Stretch 1.0 overview. And so this will help those of you who are not familiar with Stretch kind of learn what we did with the past year, and will help you understand how we're building off of the first phase in 2.0. So then we'll move into the Stretch 2.0 overview. We'll touch on the RFA and application process, and then end with a Q&A and next steps. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica from ASTO to bring us into the 1.0 overview.
Great. Thanks so much, Erin. So little bit rundown of Stretch 1.0. So Stretch is funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and stands for Strategies to Repair Equity and Transform Community Health. The Stretch team is made up of 3 organizations brought together by RWJF, ASTO, the CDC Foundation, and Michigan Public Health Institute. So the initial aims of the project focused on targeted technical assistance to state agencies to aid them in operationalizing equity. And so while the term operationalizing equity is pretty broad, this project emphasized assistance in areas such as creating sustainable funding strategies for health equity work, developing and implementing an inclusive workforce, and advancing leadership capacity to promote practices and policies that advance equity, and ultimately creating and establishing a culture of equity. So in order to achieve these project aims, the Stretch team developed the curriculum for a 10-state learning cohort. Originally, applications were received in November 2021, and we held our kickoff meeting in January 2022. The first iteration, which we call Stretch 1.0, ran through the 2022 calendar year and concluded in May 2023. The primary objectives of the learning cohort were focused on cultivating impact by fully embedding equity into agency actions and creating inclusive, equitable public health systems. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, these are the 3 organizations that make up the Stretch Partnership. It is ASTO, the CDC Foundation, and the Michigan Public Health Institute. And each 3 of these partners bring vital and unique perspectives to the work, and together create a united team of subject matter experts focused on addressing the root causes of inequities and creating tangible and sustainable change. Next slide. Yep. So in preparation for working with the state teams, the internal Stretch team developed a framework to inform the learning community offerings. So this is our Stretch framework, and as you can see, it is centered on addressing root causes of health disparities through a systems change approach, and is meant to reframe and reimagine current public health models necessary to achieve more equitable outcomes. At the center of the framework is addressing the root causes of inequities and oppression. So to fully address these causes, it can only be achieved if all 3 levels of systems change are addressed, which is the next circle you'll see. So this includes the structural level, such as policies and practices, the relational level, which includes relationships and power dynamics, and the transformative level or mental models. To achieve these levels of systems change, the 5 subject domains of the framework are interlapping and necessary functions. Depending on where our 1.0 cohort of Stretch states wanted to begin their work, they could focus on any one of the domains: community-led approaches, place-based initiatives, workforce development, data-driven management, or finance systems. By addressing each of these domains, the end goal of the framework is equitable outcomes for all. Next slide. So, in determining how to best engage with states while utilizing the Stretch framework as a guide, developing the 1.0 learning curriculum was focused on being responsive to what states told us they liked and what they needed. During the 1.0 cohort, the Stretch team provided several different types of state engagements. These included 5 all-state convenings that brought all state teams together virtually and centered around the Stretch framework domains. 2 technical workshops that helped address emerging issues within the states, one focused on developing the Stretch work plan and one focused on data. 6 lunch and learns that were set up as modules to work towards health equity and integrated boundary spanning leadership practices. 3 fireside chats that were set up as informal sessions and centered around discussions that focused on a state snapshot, one on sustainability and storytelling, and one on the role and function of intermediaries. 2 hybrid stakeholder meetings that provided states in-person networking opportunities with each other. And then finally, 4 executive leadership circles that engage state health officials and their executive teams to discuss how leaders could best support the work happening in Stretch. Another unique feature of the Stretch 1.0 experience was the core response teams for each state. So these teams were made up of 3 Stretch team partners, one from each organization, and they were on hand to provide deeper technical assistance depending on the state's needs. The core response teams built interpersonal relationships with their Stretch states by regularly attending team meetings and providing resources and offerings outside of the set cohort learnings as requested. Next slide. So before we dive into the project aims and intended outcomes for Stretch 2.0, I just wanted to take a second to wrap up the 1.0 review with some examples about how work the states did in this iteration helped lay the groundwork for where the project's planning to go. So in order to truly shift power to the communities and build a sustainable relationship between the state public health agencies and the community-based organizations, many of the states in the 1.0 cohort realized they needed to implement changes to internal practices and structures in order to properly lay the groundwork. So 2 of our states, Maryland and Mississippi, address this issue by focusing on their agency's procurement processes. So the bulk of their work in Stretch focused on addressing the barriers to getting funding from the agency directly to the community and worked on removing their red tape. Another way to prepare for equitable systems change is to ensure there's shared foundational knowledge around equity practices and principles across the agency. So 2 more of our states, Tennessee and Nevada, focused their work in this area and developed internal trainings to ensure these core principles were fully embedded in their work. And now I will turn it over to Carrie to dive into Stretch 2.0.
All right. So then, taking the learnings that we had from Stretch 1.0, we're now going forward with this new iteration of Stretch. In this section of Stretch, we hope to build on Stretch 1.0 to build a program to promote the skills, core competencies, and power sharing among state team members and their community partners that are necessary to effect change to conditions that would allow everyone the opportunity to live their healthiest life. So again, this is building on Stretch 1.0, but that is not saying anything about restriction on those who can be a part of Stretch 2.0. Everyone is welcome. The second part has 5 key objectives. The first is to build a network of health equity practitioners in state government and among their communities and intermediary partners. The second is to enhance the capacity of state public health agencies to leverage new and existing funding to sustain health equity impact. Third is to focus on essential community engagement and establishing and sustaining partnerships. 4, to translate into action models of health equity practice that demonstrate the components of structural, relational, and transformational systems change strategies. So sort of different levels of how systems need to be changed. Number 5, to support state public health agencies, health commissioners, and other executive leaders. Next slide. So during this project period from January of 2024 through May of 2025, we have a number of strategies that we intend to use to try to reach these goals. Those strategies will include providing intensive capacity building to improve the effectiveness of our work at the individual, team, organizational, and systems levels, building relationships, connections, trust, and community through power sharing and power building, developing leaders to amplify the work of these stretch teams, and shifting investments to sustain equity programming. So those strategies are kind of outlined here on this slide. And I think we can move on to the next slide. And we hope those strategies will then be beneficial for all the members of these partnerships. So that is both state public health agencies as well as community-based organizations or coalitions that would be entering into a partnership for this project. So in Stretch 1.0, we learned that state public health agencies are committed to addressing health inequities in their communities by improving community engagement and trust. And we've designed this program for state public health agencies to authentically engage with communities to address the systems that lead to health inequities, such as funding, workforce limitations, policies, relationships, power dynamics, and more. Along the way, state public health agencies will learn about what it takes at the organizational and collaboration levels to address policies, practices, funding flows, mental models to address communities' equity goals. So community-based organizations and state public health agencies will engage throughout the project to drive forward changes. Oftentimes, grant programs do not adequately fund the community-based organizations to participate in these kinds of initiatives. So Stretch 2.0 specifically designates funding to the community partners who will be engaged as a partner in this journey, while the state public health agencies will also benefit in the ways we've just been talking about. Next slide. So for this part of the work, we envision 3 different sort of levels of engagement. At the top of the slide here, you'll see we have a national level. This is open to everyone, whether or not you're a part of Stretch 2.0 or not. So at this level, learning activities may include things like blogs or webinars or podcasts, be open to all state public health agencies and their community partners so that we can extend sort of what we're learning through this project throughout the country. So again, you do not need to apply to the RFA if you want to participate at this level. This will be available through the CDCF Stretch website. In the middle level, the cohort level, so that would be all of those entities that are involved in Stretch 2.0. There will be intensive capacity building, so that will focus on relationships, connections, and power building. So again, this will be all of the partners that have joined. So each state public health agency with their CBO or coalition, all of those learning together from one another as well. And then at the bottom, the collaborative level will be tailored and responsive technical assistance with the individual partnerships so that they can be, that technical assistance is very customized to the particular situations and conditions in your state and the issues that you're working with. Next slide. Then we have this outlined some of the major activities that we plan for this part of Stretch. So for all of the collaboratives, we are looking at on-site visits with Stretch partners. So this would be at the level of really working on those conditions within your states, those partnerships with a state public health agency and the community entity. There'll be virtual capacity building workshops. It's at the level of learning with and from one another. Ongoing responsive technical assistance to each partnership. National convenings that would be available to all. Facilitated work plan development, and core team meetings amongst each of the partnerships. And then there'll also be a component for the state public health agency leadership. So we'll have some executive leadership circles to make sure that the leadership in the health agency is prepared and ready and willing to be able to support the work that you all are doing. That's the end of my section. I'll pass on to Erin.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And this is just a quick overview of our high-level timeline. So we're anticipating being able to contract with our community partners who would be receiving the funds by the end of this year, with a kickoff call scheduled for early January. We would then hope to move into in-person site visits in February and March. And then capacity building activities would be ongoing through March to November. And this would take us in to project action, where we're going to be doing work plan development and identifying funding for specific projects between December of 2024 into March of 2025. And then we're hoping to do a project wrap up in April and May of 2025, which is hopefully could be partially in person or hybrid, but we're still trying to figure out those details. So just that specifically for the cohort level, there's going to be ongoing national convenings offered throughout the whole project. So we'll be able to stay in touch with those of you who may not be able to participate in the cohort level to be able to announce resources and tools we're putting out, as well as additional webinars and convenings. So now we're going to get into the RFA and application, a little bit of the nitty-gritty stuff. So some key dates to keep in mind. The RFA was released last Thursday, and so that means that applications are now open, and the application link will be put into the chat. We'll be accepting applications on a rolling basis up until October 6th at midnight. And the application is where you'll insert your organizational information, you'll upload your attachments, and you'll also submit your answers to the project questions, which have two submission methods, either written or video. And we'll dive into those two different methods in the next slide. For those highest scoring applicants, they'll move on to the interviews, which will occur on October 11th, 13th, 24th, and 25th. And you'll be able to schedule a time that works best for you and your team. And we ask that one representative from each partner of your collaborative be present for the interview. And then once the interviews wrap up, we'll be able to announce the cohort on November 2nd. So as I mentioned, we have two submission methods for the project description questions or the project narrative. And you'll see the 4 questions we're asking you to answer in this red box here. So that's around the capacity statement, your approach, your community engagement, and your collaboration. And additional prompts to these questions are in the RFA as well. So there's 2 submission questions or methods, and you'll be able to select which method you prefer in your application. If you choose written, you'll be able to provide short responses, no more than 500 words to each of the 4 questions within the application. And we just ask that you save your work on an outside platform such as Word or Google Docs, because unfortunately our application platform does not allow you to save your work and come back to it at a later point. If you select video, you'll be able to record just a simple video of you and your team answering the questions, and this can be up to 12 minutes long. And we ask that you upload this as an unlisted video to YouTube, and then you can place the link to that YouTube video in the application. This should be a very simple video recording yourself speaking to your webcam. And in order to be fair to all other applicants with different resource capacities, we won't be reviewing any videos that include extra editing or extra video footage. And the instructions for how to upload the video to YouTube will be placed in the chat, and they're also on the RFA website as well. And so we just wanted to quickly go over some of the required documentation that we're asking applicants to upload along with their application. So the first would be a signed letter of support from your state health officer or authorized representative. And we did provide a template, or if it's easier, you can feel free to use your own. The second is the budget narrative document. We also provided a template for this. It's a very simple fillable form. So that will be uploaded as well. And then lastly is the financial documentation. And this documentation should be coming from the organization that is serving as the fiscal sponsor, so a community partner. And we ask that it be an audited balance sheet or income statement, or your IRS 990 tax form, preferably from the most current year. And please reach out to me if you need any assistance with any of this documentation. We're willing to work with you to make sure that this isn't limiting to your ability to apply. All right, so now we're going to move into some of the question and answers. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions ahead of time in your Zoom registration. It was really helpful for us to be able to prepare for the session today. So we are going to start with some of those questions that were previously submitted, and then we'll answer any of the questions from the chat, and then we'll end with any other questions that we may not have answered, and we'll ask for those of you who still have questions to come off mute and ask our team. So the first question I saw a lot in the Zoom registration was what types of CBOs are eligible to apply. So we did include an alignment criteria section in the RFA, and these are just some criteria that we thought might be helpful to think if you're assessing whether or not you'd be a good fit for the program. And so the first 3 bullets here are included in the RFA, but we just wanted to put them out as a reminder. So this is, we'd want the community partner to be recognized as a nonprofit, have sustainable operations, be in good financial standing, and also be an equal opportunity employer. The last point here we wanted to make sure we clarified was that we're not looking for CBOs to have a specific focus area or topic area, but really wanting to work with CBOs who have a focus on historically or currently marginalized populations. The second question was the description of the best applicant. And so again, that alignment criteria would also answer this question as well. But in addition to that, we're looking for the state and the community partners are committed to working with each other. I think that will be crucial for success in Stretch 2.0. Also that there is buy-in and prioritization of the work from both the state and the community partners for shared participation. Next, there's an openness and enthusiasm for learning. And lastly, there's capacity to participate in all activities. Like Carrie mentioned, we have the different levels of engagement. So if you deem that you may not have capacity to participate in all the activities at the cohort level, we'd recommend that you might not want to apply for this opportunity and solely participate at the national level. We will be offering resources and tools and convenings and webinars for all state health departments and their community partners, whether or not they are participating at the cohort level. Next question was what evaluation criteria are organizations held to? So we do work with a third-party evaluator, Strategic Prevention Solutions. So if you are a part of our cohort, you will be working with them and getting to know them and some of our evaluation methods. Some example outcomes of our evaluation seek to answer things such as increased knowledge and skills related to health equity practice and systems change, and assess shift towards more equitable structures, relationships, and mental models. And so some of the methods that we may use to be able to assess these outcomes include pre and post assessments, key informant interviews, and focus groups. And lastly, there were questions around the criteria for application, evaluation, and scoring. And we did include this in the RFA at the very end. So on pages 10 and 11 in the RFA document, you'll be able to see the exact evaluation criteria we will be using to assess applications. All right, so I believe that takes us to the end of our pre-submitted questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to check the chat for any questions that were submitted. And I'm going to tap into my wonderful team here to help me answer some of the questions if I'm not able to. So I see a question here. Is it required to have our state public health agency involved in the partnership, or can it be a local public health department? So I'm going to tap, is it someone from my team, maybe Aika or Alice? Would either of you like to answer that question?
I'm happy to chime in. Yes, so to answer your question, we're looking at it from a partnership level with a state-based public health agency. And so one of the things that's kind of noted in the application materials itself is the existence of a relationship sort of being established in a pre-established relationship in that way as well. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Aika. And I also see a question here. Can it be who needs to participate in the executive leadership circles? Just the state agency leadership or CBO leadership as well? And I'm gonna tap into you, Aika, as well, since ASTO leads those efforts.
A good question. So in the past, it's primarily been in 1.0, it's primarily been of state-based agency folks and creating just the opportunity for those folks. And I think kind of in this avenue, we can explore sort of a little bit more flexibility and inclusion for how we want to structure the circles to include leadership engagement across the board. So not just state-based, but also through CBOs.
Thank you. I see a question here. Can it be an office within the state public health agency? Example, Office of Rural Health. Yes, we did work with whole offices in 1.0. We do recommend that there be some cross-departmental team members so that the work is not siloed. But yes, I think that the leadership or lead from the state public health agency should come from an office within the state public health agency. All right. Did I miss any questions in the chat? If my team can let me know if I.
We have a new one, Erin. Christine Gunn would like to know a clarification point. So to clarify, as long as a local public health department has state health department as a partner, can they apply?
Thank you, Philip. Yes, the local public health department can be a part of the collaborative, but we do want the state health department and community partners to also be involved.
Kathleen asks, is this just for Michigan? And maybe that's because the Michigan Public Health Institute is a partner. It's certainly not. It is for all states and territories.
Thank you, Philip.
And there was a question about slides being available later, which I think the answer is yes. I presume we'll put that information in the chat here before the end of the call.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. The slides and this recording will be posted to the CDC Foundation website where the RFA is located, and it will also be emailed out to all of the registrants. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can come off mute, or you can continue to put your questions in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing how many awards will be made. So we are looking to have 7 collaboratives join the cohort. So each collaborative, their community partner would receive the award. Do local health departments count as CBOs? We are looking to partner with community-based organizations who are deemed as a nonprofit. So we would want both the local health department and the community-based partner be involved in the collaborative. Okay, I'm seeing since the majority of scheduled activities for this grant are TA collaborative focused, what do you anticipate being acceptable activities to fund through this grant? It's a great question. And I'm going to tap into my team to help me answer. Would Aika or Philip like to take this one?
Well, Aika, I always love to hear what you have to say, but I know I can share from my examples of 1.0 and how I see it forming into 2.0. We have done things as wide-ranging as look at how we can do outreach within a state to access more areas that haven't been accessed. We can do some types of landscape analyses. We could do some types of discrete strategic planning. We can do lots of training on health equity and how we take health equity and put it into action. Probably we are willing to look at a number of different activities, wouldn't you say? That was
I
kind of,
would,
okay,
no,
cool.
I would agree too. So Jessica elevated the stretch framework, and if you noticed, the addressing the root causes, and then there's structural, relational, and transformational. It's such a wide range, kind of inclusive of those rings, along with the outer rings. So if there's a specific area of focus that, for example, like the finance domains, or if your effort is like strategically focused on data, so like the data-driven mechanism, there's a lot of ways that when we think about addressing root causes and embedding systems change, that this work can kind of present itself. It really just depends on the particular needs of the collaborative and what you all are seeing that could be an area and a gap that you would make the most sense to fill.
And Ben, did you have something in particular in mind?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about a couple of different collaboratives that this could potentially apply to, some of which are really sort of already active public health programs. And so trying to gauge sort of if this would sort of be used to fund some of those public health programs activities, or if it's really more around restructuring the collaborative or reinforcing the collaborative. And so I'm just sort of brainstorming. But I do appreciate your responses and some of the ideas that clearly others have thought about also.
Right, I see a good question in the chat. What do you mean by pre-established partnership between a CBO or community coalition and a state public health agency? Does receiving funding from that state agency count? And I'm going to do my best to answer this. And then if I miss anything, please feel free to add in. But we understand that partnerships between CBOs and state health agency may be varying across the spectrum. And so we're able to work with you in whatever form or stage you're in. That's why we didn't really give too much more details around that, because we are open to different types of partnerships. But yes, receiving funding from the state agency does count as a pre-established relationship.
So if I could come off mute, what I was maybe just like the purpose behind that is because this is such a short-term project of it just being about a year and a half. And so it's a tough time period in which to actually create a new relationship and work on all of the sort of strengthening of that relationship and working on equity and how to meet community needs and all of that within a short period of time. And so that's where we're coming at this request for partnerships to be already established, is to so that you can come in with already having some sort of awareness of each other and how each other work in some way, and you can go forward from there instead of kind of starting from scratch given the short time frame.
Thanks, Carrie, for that addition.
And I don't know if we can answer Latori's question. They are in Washington, D.C. Do they go to the Department of Health to sign the letter?
I can chime in. So connected to this pre-established relationship, it would just mean for the DC Department of Health, that relationship kind of coordinated and sort of pre-established in that way. So it would specifically be, yes, the DC Department of Health.
And thank you. You can just real quick, Aaron, I'm sorry, I'll try to answer Kathleen's question because I think it's about Michigan. And help me, Carrie. So she asked, when you say local health department, does that mean Michigan? I think that maybe what you're saying is, does that mean, would you go to the Ingham County Health Department? Would you go to the Genesee County Health Department? And I believe that that's what we consider the local health department rather than MDHHS. Is that correct, Carrie?
Right. So I think the question of local versus state is that we would, ultimately what this initiative would hope to do is to impact public health as a broader system. And we want that to make sure that's involving communities. And so part of that public health system is the state, and it may be part of however your state is organized, some kind of local health that may be public health, which may be city, it may be county. But we want to be thinking about, ideally it would be the whole kind of public health system, if you think in that terms, and that would include local public health. But we're not requiring that all of those levels participate. Although we would hope that it would be maybe people you could bring in, or partners you could think through in the course of the project. It's the two that are required are the state public health agency, and then the community-based partner or coalition that already exists.
Thanks, Carrie. I see a question that's asking when would CBOs receive the funding? So like I said earlier, we'll announce the cohort on November 2nd, and then we're hopeful that we'll be able to finish contracting with the CBOs by the end of the year for a first payment in the beginning of 2024, most likely in January.
Jenny wants to know if the funds can be used to purchase food and beverages.
Thanks, Philip. I think it would depend on the purpose of the food and beverages, but CDC Foundation is definitely open to working with all the CBOs on putting together their budget.
And Keisha would like to know, could potential activities include overdose fatality review committees, Narcan vending machines, training hosted by state public health associations, etc.? Just want to make sure we are on the right track with our application.
Does someone from my team want to take that one?
I can chime in. Yes, I think we talked a little bit about it with the framework. It would just depend on how it's sort of connecting to this larger goal or outcome or process connected to addressing root causes. And so while all of those are sort of vast, and I'm catching a lot of the overdose focus and what you're illuminating, it would just specifically depend on when it's all said and done, what's the goal and the efforts and all of these pieces sort of being part of the puzzle connected to that.
And the next question, I'll turn it back over to you, Erin, although I think I'm supposed to be helping doing this. My old friend Jazong asks from Minnesota, Minnesota is working on finance and funding system in 1.0. Can we continue to focus on this and our goal from 1.0, right? Duzong, I don't think exactly right. And help me, team, right? I think that this is, so stretch 1.0 is it's finished, right? And now what we want to do, and I would be so eager to work with Minnesota again, is to look at this RFA and the model set forth, which is really engaging a community-based organization who would be the fiduciary to draw out the Department of Health in Minnesota into a more community-based endeavor. Is that correct, my team? Captains, all my captains?
Yes, thank you, Philip.
But if I could just add a friendly amendment, I think that I could imagine that a project with community coalition might well or could confront issues around funding mechanisms or how funding is deployed or prioritized or distributed. That could be a way, to Aika's point earlier, of looking at root causes around some of those funding streams and thinking about how those might be evolve or be modified.
Thank you, Lauren. Yes, big heart and shout out to you for that, because now I'm thinking to Duzong, we'll talk. There is a way to strategize that because we're working with local health departments as well as other agencies. So I think we can figure out a way. to figure something out.
And just wanted to uplift the question in the chat around funding going directly to the CBOs, and that isn't intentional by design. We understand that CBOs are not usually compensated for participation in initiatives like this, and so we wanted to make sure that our community partners are being fairly awarded. All right, if my team, I think we're caught up in the chat.
One more thing just to add, Erin, to that piece is that we also recognize that state health departments are going to have access or do have access to significant federal funding that is coming into states as part of the infrastructure grants that are coming from CDC. So we know that there's a potential source of resources for states that potentially, depending on how they're thinking about deploying them for the data modernization, the workforce development, could be coordinated with or complementary to this effort that we're talking about. And part of what will happen in Stretch 2.0 is a very explicit coordination with the groups that are leading the technical assistance and support of states who are receiving that infrastructure grant funding.
Thanks, Lauren. I see a question here, ask if they work for a university, but work with CBO partners. Would it be more acceptable or appropriate for one of their CBO partners to apply? Yes, we would like the person who is serving, or not the person, the organization who would be serving as the fiscal sponsor, so the 501c3 organization, to be the one to apply. But they will require those attachments that we discussed earlier. So that would include the letter of support from the state health officer, as well as the other attachments. All right, well, last call for questions. Either you can come off mute or keep continuing to put them in the chat. Otherwise, we will move on to next steps. All right, Francesca, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you so much. Do you mind sharing your screen again, Erin, or would you like me to pull up that last slide? Thank you all so much for joining us today. It was so wonderful to get to talk to you all about what we did in Stretch 1.0 and what we're hoping to accomplish with Stretch 2.0. Please be aware that we will be posting this recording and the slides to the C2C Foundation's website on our request for proposal page. That link will be shared out with you all after this recording is posted as well. So you all will have direct access to it, and please feel free to share. There's also a webpage for Stretch that has the overview of Stretch 2.0, the link to our framework that was referenced in today's call, as well as an overview of 1.0. And I encourage you all to look at it to hopefully provide some additional background information if needed. If you have any questions regarding accessibility or the RFA, please email Erin. As you can see from today's call, she is a wealth of knowledge and will be very happy to assist you in anything that you need in regards to the application. And then one final reminder that the applications are due October 6th. Please let us know if you have any concerns or any difficulty with the application leading up to that time. But applications received after that will not be viewed by the team. And as a reminder, you have your written or your video submissions that will be allowed for the 4 core questions. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you offering your time to us and your wonderful questions. And we look forward to having the opportunity to work more with you in the future. Have a great day, you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.